Palestine do?
Yeah, President Biden is entirely complicit. He's completely silent on the issues of ongoing ethnic cleansing by the Israeli regime.
Both atrocities are committed by both sides, but the basic issue is Israel is preventing the Palestinians from living a normal life because they want to take their land.
I think that as long as all that money's being sent over there, I don't know how peace could ever prevail.
A new dimension in sound. This is love. As the record plays, love.
Hi there, folks. I'm Keegan Van Hook, and welcome to Us As We Are. Once again, we're reporting from the Ashland Plaza, where, as seems to happen every weekend here in Ashland, a protest has formed. This time, it's concerning the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Certainly a very complicated issue, so we're going to go and talk to some people and see what their opinions are. Come on, let's go. Could you just explain what brings you out here today?
The whole situation that's ongoing in Palestine is horrific and continues to be, and with the recent intrusions into Gaza from the Israelis, we have no choice but to be out here and call for a full boycott of Israel.
What do you think should happen with Israel? Like, how should the U.S. government act in response to it? What should the Israelis do? What should Palestine itself do?
I think the U.S. should immediately withdraw all funding for the state of Israel. As far as long-term positions, I believe that we need a democratic state in Palestine. That means bringing down the borders. That means allowing all people to vote and setting up a constitutional democracy in Palestine.
So that being said, what do you think will happen?
We can only hope for the best. Unfortunately, under the extreme right-wing government of Netanyahu, they're continuing their aggression, and we're all hoping for the best. I don't have high hopes at this point, but we've got to be out here. We're hoping people are out all over the world standing up for justice for the people of Palestine.
Right on. Well, thanks so much, Eric.
Yeah, thanks.
Why don't you first just start by introducing yourself and explain what brings you out here today?
Yeah, I'm Ryan Navikas, and I've been active on issues in the Middle East since '91, when the U.S. invaded Iraq and committed numerous war crimes.
So what do you think should happen over with Israel? How should the U.S. government react to what's happening there? What should Israel do? What should Palestine do?
Yeah, President Biden is entirely complicit. He's completely silent on the issues of ongoing ethnic cleansing by the Israeli regime, and continues to suppress or express just complete solidarity with Israel as they carry out war crimes against Gaza.
So what would you prefer from the U.S. government in reaction to what's going on there?
The United States is the only country that has any sort of pull with the Israeli regime, because the Israeli regime is entirely dependent on U.S. aid to continue its apartheid system. So Americans need to stand up and demand that their government quit funding regimes in Palestine and around the world that commit human rights atrocities that are condemned by international law.
And that all being said, what do you think actually will happen? What do you predict will come about as a result of this conflict?
Well, I think Biden's made it very clear where he stands. He stands lockstep with the Israeli apartheid state and the numerous other dictatorships
in the Middle East that are the recipients of United States aid that are allied with the Zionist state.
All right, well, Ryan, I want to thank you for talking to me and sharing your opinion.
Thanks a lot.
Why don't you please introduce yourself and explain why you came out here today?
My name is Gene Robbins, and I came out here because I want to protest the unjust Israeli occupation of Palestine. The incident that initiated the current violence is the continued ethnic cleansing of Jerusalem. Palestinians are being forced out of their homes so that Israeli Jews can take them. This has been going on for decades, as illustrated by the famous Israeli historian Ilan Pappé. So basically, the old bumper sticker that says, if you want peace, work for justice, applies here as well. This is a terrible flare-up, but it's just another skirmish that's going to continue until there's justice. And there won't be justice until the occupation ends and the Palestinians get their human rights.
So what do you think the United States should or could do to help the situation over there?
Well, stop funding Israel. I mean, we supply between $3 to $4 billion a year for their military, and we offer diplomatic support and financial support, and we need to do that. And that, unfortunately, it's going to have to come from the ground up because our leaders are influenced by the power of the Israel lobby, which is very powerful, and they provide a lot of money. That's been documented as well by Mearsheimer and Walt. And so this is a problem that's been long-standing, but hopefully we are making a little bit of progress, and we will continue to try and make more.
Do you think attitudes in America are changing about Israel? Because we've seen for a long time sort of the status quo in the U.S. has been supporting Israel, but now there seems to be a lot more kind of from the bottom up, non-support for their government.
Yes, unfortunately not to a large enough degree to make a huge difference yet. But change, unfortunately, is slow, but there is slowly changing attitudes, and you just have to keep working for it, keep working towards your goal. Like John Lewis said, keep your eye on the prize, and the prize is we want to get peace in the Middle East. The way to do it is provide justice to the Palestinians. This is not an equal conflict. Both atrocities are committed by both sides, but the basic issue is Israel is preventing the Palestinians from living a normal life because they want to take their land.
All right, well, thank you for talking to me today.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so do you want to tell us a little bit about what you guys are playing, the kind of music it is, and also just why you're out here today?
Music's what we do, and it's kind of a way we can come here and bring some support to, for me, I feel quite a strong cause here to stand in solidarity with our relatives over there in Palestine, especially in Gaza at the moment. And yeah, it's been an ongoing situation of state violence, really. I think regardless of religion or ethnicity or anything like that, there's state violence happening from one state, an army and an air force and a navy against people who aren't allowed their own self-determination, the Palestinian people, and also don't have an army or a navy or an air force or anything. They're cobbling together what they can to defend themselves. And I think, yeah, the boycott, the divestment, the amount of money that the United States sends to support the state of Israel causes a great deal of imbalance in the region. And I think that as long as all that money's being sent over there, I don't know how peace could ever prevail.
What do you think of the reaction of the U.S. government so far? You know, Joe Biden kind of being, some would say, a little bit soft to Israel. What do you think, and what would you like to see from our government in response to what's going on there?
Yeah, I think the response is predictable, it's lame. I'd like to see something much more strong. I mean, what I'd like to see, I can't really imagine it because it's kind of the program of United States hegemony of imperialism. It's an extension. They went from sea to shining sea. Where else do they go after that? So it's obvious geopolitically a presence in the Middle East, in Israel specifically, in Palestine is very convenient for continuing United States military control. Yeah.
Was there anything that you wanted to add?
not that he didn't say.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys both.
Yeah, no,
And
thanks for
I'll let
being
you
here.
guys get
Thanks
back
for
to playing
covering it.
music. Absolutely.
I really think that it's time for the United States to stop backing one side.
Sure.
It's not right.
Yeah.
And the Palestinians are not necessarily Hamas.
Right.
And so this is just craziness. It's apartheid. The way the Israelis have forced the Palestinians into such a small area. And I understand this latest thing erupted because of the latest land grab, some really sacred space. So I am tired of my tax dollars and your tax dollars going to support something that is this craven and bad, the weaponizing of Israel when they can buy their own bombs, you know. Not that they should, but they would. We could spend our money much more wisely. I want my tax dollars going to support things that help people, not kill people.
So then, what do you think the U.S. response to the latest round of conflicts should be? You know, like what would a specific response to what's going on? What would you like to see?
Probably it would be off record. I think a little muscle from somebody like Anthony Blinken or one of his delegated people to say, hey, look, we're pulling the bucks. We're not going to give you the money. I don't think there's any other way to stop Israel than to withdraw some of the funding. And I know that there are some politicians that feel this is very risky and they're all in for Israel, but Palestinians are people too, for heaven's sakes. And it makes us look, it makes us, when we're supporting a government that has in fact turned their country into an apartheid, this is not right. This is not right.
Well, first, the United States should get its hands off of countries around the world and stop trying to be the great imperialist power. But that's not going to happen because that's what drives U.S. foreign policy, is we need to be the imperialist power. It's also one of the things that's going to help drag the United States down, because that's not a sustainable status for the United States in the long run. But the other thing is that in terms of U.S. foreign policy, we should be supporting democratic movements, human rights movements, the human rights of people around the world, democracies around the world. Israel is no longer a democracy. And I would argue that when Israel passed its nation-state law, declaring Israel to be the nation-state of the Jewish people, and saying that one of the state's imperatives is to increase Jewish settlement in the West in Palestine, Israel essentially officially became a fascist state. And I do not use that term lightly. And I would challenge anyone who disagrees with characterization of Israel as a fascist state to give me a definition of fascism that includes Franco's Spain, Mussolini's Italy, and apartheid South Africa that excludes Israel today.
My particular feeling is, because I got a sign about racism here, is that the Israeli posture is very racist. It is based on a bunch of, European white people deciding that God gave them the right to take this land from the non-white people who lived there. Very much like Manifest Destiny in the U.S. The Israelis are attempting to do the same thing. Every Israeli leader since the founding of the nation has made strong and obvious statements about what we need to do is remove the Palestinians, remove the Arabs. And there's actually a pamphlet that Herb wrote that has quotes from all the quotes from every one of them. Ben Gurion, everybody just saying this stuff about, we need to get them out of here, and it's very much based on the idea of being the chosen people, of white people being, particularly Jewish white people, and now particularly certain kinds of Jewish people that are, very super fundamentalist religiously. They're almost into, excluding secular Jews. People with strong Jewish traditions that still observe all the holidays and stuff. If they're not willing to move into a settlement. And what they're doing now, expelling Palestinians who are living in Jerusalem, which they've taken over, from housing, so they can tear it down and build new housing, so that Netanyahu's son, who's a big housing developer, can make lots of money with U.S. subsidies.
Yeah, so that's the big question we're asking people is what do you think the U.S. response to all this should be, and what do you think of what it's been so far?
Our contributions to the Israeli military exceed, I don't mean exclude, I mean exceed, our efforts in all kinds of other directions that are important. I saw a thing yesterday where it was pointing how much more the budget for Israel is over the budget for making COVID-19 vaccine available to the rest of the world. Just for example. And so, yeah, we're very much against, or I'm very much against, there's a whole variety of people here, but I'm very much against U.S. military support for Israel and some of the other kinds of support as well. They don't really need our military support. They got their own nuclear weapons. They got plenty of money. But yeah, the U.S. is doing a lot to support the settlement movement by supporting housing development and a lot of the laws and other kinds of things that go along with it.
Well, I want to thank you for talking to me today and sharing your opinion.
Okay.
So what do you think about what's going on with Israel and Palestine? What do you think of the situation itself? And then furthermore, what do you think the U.S. response should be? And what do you think of what it has been?
Well, there's no point in talking about anything that goes on in Israel and Palestine without knowing that the general context is a determination that was expressed from the beginning of the modern Zionist movement to occupy all the land of what was called Eretz Israel, the original Israel. And at one point, when I was writing a weekly column for the Ashland Tidings, which I did for a number of years, I just took statements, starting with Theodore Herzl, one of the two founders, and bring it all the way up through, Ben Gurion and Golda Meir and all. And what they say is that they were going to find ways to push the Palestinians off the land. And that's what they've done. It's taken them a long time, but they've been fairly patient about it. The big event was 48, when they had the plan to, as soon as statehood was declared, to push Palestinians out, and they just wiped out 400 towns and claimed falsely that the Palestinians fled on their own accord. And then, starting with Shamir, who in the 70s, they started putting the settlements in. And it was only a question of time before they were going to annex it. And that's what Netanyahu declared, that they were going to annex significant parts of the West Bank. And of course, right now, the current, they want to push Palestinians out of East Jerusalem, and that sparked the current outbreak of violence. But it's just a continuing pattern from the beginning.
All right, why don't you introduce yourself and explain why you came out here today?
My name is Avram Sachs. I was taught when I was growing up that Israel really saved the Jewish people. My grandfather died at Auschwitz in the concentration camp. And my parents loved Israel, and I love Israel. Uh-oh. But what's heartbreaking to realize is that the very things that were done to the Jewish people during the Holocaust, unfortunately, are now being done by the Jewish people to the Palestinians. Right. By the state of Israel, I really should say, not by all Jewish people. And what's ironic is that the people that are being evicted in East Jerusalem from their homes, the 70 families, it's because before 1948, Jewish people lived in those homes. So they're saying that they have a right to return. So I say, well, okay, if Jewish people have a right to return to those homes, then you're acknowledging that the right of return is a legitimate protocol for the entire world. So the Palestinians will move out in return for the million Palestinians returning who you haven't allowed to return home yet. When Israel became a state, it's in their charter with the UN that the refugees have to come home. So that's the main thing. They basically are prisoners of the Israeli occupation, and if Jewish people were treated the way they're treated, every temple in this country would be screaming bloody murder. So why don't you see what Jan has to say now?
Israel is exploiting Palestinians, and we're supporting it. And they wouldn't do it if we didn't support it. And I think that's really a tragedy. That's a crime against humanity. And I don't like it. I don't like it that the Israel lobby seems to have so much power here. And that you can't really, it's hard to speak out to the press about this because then we get persecuted. So, what else do I want to say? I feel like I need to speak up for my integrity, that I really don't like what we're doing with Israel, and I've written to the president, I've made my voice, I've put out my voice. I don't imagine that's going to do a whole lot, but I feel like I have to.
What do you think, U.S. policy-wise, what do you think should change? How do you think our government should respond to the actions of their government?
You're talking about Israel?
Yes.
I think we should take a strong stand and withhold financial support until they stopped it.
Well, is there anything that you wanted to add to what you were saying?
Yeah, definitely we should use the aid as leverage. That has happened. Actually, one of the President Bush's, when the Oslo Accords were being negotiated, said, negotiate for peace, and we're withholding your aid until you do. And it hasn't happened since, and it needs to happen again. The problem is the Israeli lobby, any politician that speaks out, they make it a point to try to pour money into their district and get them voted out of office. Obama, when he was an Illinois congressman, spoke out in favor of the Palestinians, but once he ran for national office, you never heard him speak about it. So we need to break that wall of silence. Thank God that we have people like AOC now and Rashida Tlaib and Presley who are speaking out. So we actually have voices in Congress.
We talked to you before, right on this very spot, just a few weeks ago. Now you're out here for a new reason. Why don't you introduce yourself again, but explain what brings you out here today?
Yeah, my name's Stephen Essig. I'm just out here because I feel like it's important to spread the awareness of the war crimes and the apartheid state that's happening. It's recently escalated really quickly. Just today, the Israeli forces destroyed an Associated Press building along with an Al Jazeera media building. And I mean, they're war crimes. We know they're war crimes. It's in the Geneva Convention. We know that IDF forces target children, and I mean, it's not that complicated of an issue. We can't have state violence against children. We can't have state violence against families. The Gaza Strip is basically an open-air prison. It's the third most population density in the world, with I think like 13,000 people per square mile, and 50% of the population is unemployed because of sanctions and borders. There's electricity is barely available. There's reports that with the water situation in Gaza, it's going to be uninhabitable in the next few years. It's completely destroyed. And I mean, these are war crimes. Doesn't matter who's doing it. It's not okay. We got to stand up for that.
So what about the U.S. government in all of this? What do you think our government should do in response to the actions the Israelis have taken?
Yeah, we just had Joe Biden speak on this, and he was saying that Israel has the right to self-defense. And I think the biggest problem with the U.S. is they'll say they believe in self-defense, but there's no self-defense in war crimes. I mean, we have children being killed right there. There's nothing you can do about. It's not like there's no way you can say that there's appropriate self-defense there. And with the U.S., we give a lot of military backing to the Israeli state. We send police officers to Israel to train. There's a lot of things that we do to keep Israel alive and to keep it going. And a lot of that directly contributes to the war crimes. And I mean, a lot of it ties back to the U.S. I mean, other than with the aid kind of thing that's happening, there's this concept called Foucault's boomerang. Foucault's boomerang, where as stuff are used across the world, and we see those tactics being used, they come back to the U.S. to haunt us. And not even that, a lot of the same things that are happening in Israel and in Palestine have already happened in the U.S. We've had this happen with indigenous people. We had this happening just a few days ago. Was the anniversary of the MOVE bombing in Philadelphia. And so these are things that when they happen on the other side of the world, we have to condemn them in our nation as well, because it can happen here. It can all happen here if we let it happen. Yeah.
Stephen, thank you so much for sharing your opinion.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being out here, and thanks for sharing the news.
Of course. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this episode of Us As We Are. As always, thank you so much to the people who decided to talk to us on camera and share some of their opinions. And thank you for watching. Before I go, I do, of course, want to mention that we have a Patreon page. So if you like what we're doing here and want to support our efforts, please consider supporting Patreon. New to Patreon is our Discord server. It's something we just set up. It's just getting started. It's just a small community of folks to talk about the issues that we discuss here on the show. So if you are curious about that, check it out at patreon.com/SailorBoyMedia. Additionally, we're still doing our short versions of some of these programs for Southern Oregon PBS. So if you want to know more about that, go to Southern Oregon PBS, you go to sopbs.org/usasweare. With that, folks, I've been Keegan Van Hook. This is Us As We Are, and we'll see you in the next one.
As always, thank you to our major Patreon supporters: Adam, Alex Zendejas, Amy E. Van Hook, Bethany McKenzie, Daniel Van Hook, Elizabeth Austin, and Robin Jossie.